This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. And for an extra 10% off, use the code CFSPJ10 at checkout. Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the result against Bournemouth by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to bring you interviews with Roy Hodgson and Scott Dann after the game. So let's begin. Palace extended their unbeaten run to 5 matches against Bournemouth, but a stoppage-time penalty missed by Christian Benteke saw the 2-point slip from their grasp. A crazy first half saw Jermain Defoe open the scoring after just 10 minutes before 2 goals in quick succession from Luka Milivojevic and substitute Scott Dann turned things back in Roy Hodgson's side's favour. But in stoppage time, a fantastic strike by Defoe restored parity. The second half couldn't live up to the quality of the first, but in the 90th minute the Eagles won a second penalty which Benteke took. But as Milivojevic saved it to see the Cherries escape with a point. 4 minutes of a crazy opening 45 had elapsed when Wilfried Zaha tripped his way past Steve Cook and saw his cross deflected to Jeffrey Slop, who sweetly struck shot zipped over the White Horse Lane crossbar. And then soon after Zaha found himself on the opposite flank and picked out Christian Benteke, but his downward header met the same fate. But by the 10th minute the hosts found themselves behind thanks to a familiar nemesis. After winning a corner, a textbook training move saw Andrew Sermon play a short one to Julian Stanislas, who quickly returned it to the midfielder, and he played the ball low back into the box for an unmarked Defoe to accurately stroke past Julian Sproni to score against Palace for the 9th time in 11 appearances. Replays showed that Defoe had been left unattended due to Slap being held in the box by Joshua King, and that fired up the Eagles, who quickly began probing for an equaliser. Firstly, Benteke saw a shot stopped by the legs of Begovic, and then Andros Townsend's powerful blast was blocked by the chest of Nathan Ake. From the resulting corner, a spot of goal line pinball ensured that the ball struck Mamadou Sakho, but somehow bounced wide of the mark. The bad luck continued for the Frenchman, as 24 minutes in he was left prone on the turf with a calf injury, but play was allowed to continue and only a fine covering tackle by James Tompkins prevented an opportunist Defoe from doubling the lead. Dan came on for Sakho and he was quickly on the back foot as Danger Man Defoe wriggled free in the box again, but Sproni managed to smother the chance. But soon the nets were rippling at both ends as a flurry of goals arrived in the final 5 minutes of the first half. Firstly, a superb flick on by Benteke allowed Zaha to brush past Nathan Ake and speed into the area, and as he tried to round Begovic he was brought down by the Bosnian stopper for a spot kick, and as usual Milivojevic stepped up and hammered it home into the top corner. Better came for the Eagles a minute before the break when they earned a corner on the right, and a neat Yonkabay delivery caused further mayhem in the box before Benteke finally got it under control. He returned possession to the Frenchman, who drilled an inviting centre across the face of goal, and Dan was waiting at the back post to become the first Premier League defender in history to score against the same opponents in 4 consecutive games. But once again a late goal at the end of the half would cost Palace dear. A long ball over the top by Lewis Cook allowed Defoe to race onto it, and as it landed just inside the host's box, and after it let bounce at a nice height, he looped a sensational half volley over Sproni to complete a third brace in 3 matches against the Eagles, and draw applause from the home fans adjacent in the main stand. The break gave players and supporters alike a chance to have a deserved breather, but once the action resumed a pulsating affair continued, as Kabay and Stanislas scuppered the efforts goalwards before Defoe screwed on wide when well placed to complete his hat-trick around the hour mark. Then in 78 minutes a golden opportunity came Palace's way once again, when Benteke used his aerial presence to win another flick on and find Dan at the back post. But the centre-back couldn't net his double as he fired the bouncing ball into the Homesdale Road stand. Having grabbed late winners against West Ham United and Stoke City in recent months to claim huge wins, Hodgson's team pressed late on to replicate those huge victories, and Ruben Loftus-Cheek forced Begovic into a good stop at his near post before Milivojevic scooped wide with 5 minutes remaining. However, in the final minute Zaha was again brought down in the box by Charlie Daniels and Kevin Friend pointed to the spot. Despite Milivojevic still being on the pitch, Benteke was the man who stepped forward to take the crucial kick, but it was comfortable for Begovic, who saved to prevent a third last-minute home victory of the campaign. It was a dramatic clash at Selhurst Park on Saturday as Crystal Palace and AFC Bournemouth shared the spoils. Christian Benteke missed a penalty in injury time as the Eagles dropped back to the bottom of the table, with wins for West Ham United and Swansea City moving them above Palace. But what did we learn from the game that featured 4 goals in a pulsating first half, including 2 goals from Bournemouth striker Jermain Defoe and goals from Luka Milivojevic and Scott Dann for Palace? So here are 5 things. Number 1. Christian Benteke's struggle continues. Crystal Palace may currently have only one fit recognised striker with Premier League experience, but Christian Benteke is not exactly firing on all cylinders. The former Liverpool and Aston Villa man has not yet found a net this season, and his late penalty miss extended his goal drought to 12 games. Roy Hodgson said that he played better against Bournemouth, but he is in desperate need of a goal. And unfortunately for the Belgian, he can't seem to get a break at the moment. He looks short of confidence, and with his lack of sharpness in front of goal has highlighted by his hesitation in the run-up for the penalty. Whether or not he should have been taking the penalty is another debate, having missed his last 2 in a Palace shirt before this one. But having assumed the responsibility, Hodgson says that he has put himself in a black hole with the supporters by missing. Number 2. What is it about Jermain Defoe and Crystal Palace? Coming into the game, the Englishman was the only player to have scored more than 5 goals in the Premier League against Palace, and now he has added 2 more to his tally, taking him to 9 in 10 against the Eagles. He scored the brace against the Eagles twice for Sunderland last season, including 2 fine finishes in front of the Homestyle stand in a 4-0 win back in February, and he did so again on Saturday. And his second goal, a stunning volley over Speroni, was very reminiscent of Casimir's superb strike for Fulham at the same end a few years ago. Number 3. What is it about Scott Dann and Bournemouth? While Defoe has a superb record against the Eagles, the same could be said for Palace defender Dann. Coming into the game, he scored in each of his last 3 games against the Cherries, and he made it 4 in 4 here with another goal. No other central defender has ever achieved this feat of scoring 4 times in 4 games against the same opponent in the Premier League. He should have got another though, with the defender missing from close range after a Benteke flick in the second half. Number 4. Knowing me, knowing you, Zaha. Crystal Palace ace Wilfried Zaha had a mixed afternoon. On the one hand, he was a constant menace to the Bournemouth defenders, winning 2 penalties and having a number of other shouts turned down. His performance was described as out of this world by his manager, and there was no doubt that he was Palace's biggest threat going forward. But for all the positives about his display, he did show signs of frustration and was booked for an angry reaction to a clinical foul by Lewis Cook in the second half. Meanwhile, his involvement in both penalties led to some questions from the Bournemouth defenders aimed towards referee Kevin Friend, with the Cherries players particularly aggrieved at the late award of the penalty that Benteke missed. Bournemouth boss Eddie Howe said that his players were adamant that Charlie Daniels won the ball when making his challenge on Zaha, whilst he said that his players also felt that the first one was not clear-cut. And number 5, a point to prove. Crystal Palace have now drawn 3 consecutive games in the Premier League for the first time since 2005, when Ian Dowie was in charge. But while they are now 5 games unbeaten, there is a feeling that they need to turn these draws into victories if they are to escape the trouble they currently find themselves in. Palace won their last home game with a goal in injury time against Stoke City, and they had a golden opportunity to do so here again, but spurned it. And while they are proving harder to beat in recent weeks, the results yesterday showed what a 3-point haul can do for a side, as West Ham and Swansea move back above them. So I'm now going to move on to the player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at @crystalpalace for all the latest Palace news. And also, if you're on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group, which is a really great place to join in with discussions and share your opinions with other fans. And much like an online forum, it's a great place to upload videos, photos, and any links and articles you want to share with other Palace fans, and you want others to see what you've seen, and you want to share your opinion and see what others have to say about what you've shared. If you do like to do that and like to hear what others have to say and like to put your opinion across to others as well, then of course do join the Facebook group, because like I've said, much like a forum, it's a great place to share your opinion. Now, another great place to share your opinion is in the YouTube comments, so if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, rating the players from 1 to 10, with 10 being the best. Now, you can do this along with your views on the game, and even if you don't want to do your player ratings, just comment something below, whether you're a Bournemouth fan, whether you're a Palace fan. Do comment below the video with your views on the game, whether it be you think that the 2 of them penalties should have stood, whether you think Benteke or Luka should have taken the penalty off of Benteke, whether you think that actually Benteke should be dropped for missing a penalty. Do comment below any views from the game. And the only reason I want you to comment below the video is not only so I can look back at the video and, you know, see what the people listening will thought, but it's also other people who come to the video, whether they be Bournemouth or whether they be Palace fans, they can come to the video and not only listen to my views in the podcast, but they can also read what other fans have to say about the game. So if you are someone who likes to share your opinion and likes to, you know, post your opinion so others can read it, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video. But if you do want to follow any of these social media pages and join the Facebook group, then all the links will be in the description below. But I'm now going to move on to my player ratings, starting in goal with Julian Speroni, who I'm going to give a 6. Had to pick the ball out of his own net twice, but was off his line quickly to deny Defoe another, and made a smart save to stop Jordan Ibe. So Julian Speroni here, the legend, I've given him a 6, and much like his performances have been this season, it was quite an average performance from him. And when you consider that the two main things he had to do in the game was obviously take the ball out of his own net with the 2 goals that Jermain Defoe scored, other than that he didn't actually particularly have to do much in the game, and that's mainly the reason I've given him a 6. But much like his performances have been this season, even though he has a quiet game and doesn't make any saves or not really involved, purely because the other team are not really putting as much pressure on goal that they would have liked, even though that was the case in this game once again, still there was 1 or 2 other chances where actually you know, Bournemouth got a few chances and Speroni was there to make the saves, and that's something which we've been asking for our goalkeepers for last season, the beginning of this season. You know, Hennessy didn't do it last season, Mandanda didn't do it, Speroni at some points hasn't done it, and what it is just making these simple saves that keep you in the game. It's not about making spectacular saves and stopping every single shot on goal, it's about doing the simple things right. And, you know, if you were to describe this performance, is that he didn't have much to do other than take the, you know, get the ball out of his own net, but actually he done these simple things right. So there was one from Defoe, obviously, where Defoe's got through on goal. Speroni, very quick off his line, got the ball and stopped that chance, and we know how good Defoe is, so you've got to stop him as quick as possible. So Speroni done that really well. And then there was another one, Jordan Ibe from about 20-25 yards out had a shot, and Speroni was equal to it, so obviously he caught it. So them 2 chances alone, if they had gone in, it would have been a completely different story. You know, I believe, obviously I don't know the exact times, but Defoe's goal, that probably would have made it maybe 3-2, I believe, or maybe, no, probably would have been 2-2 at that point, Defoe's second goal. But even so, it doesn't matter when it was in the game, the fact that he stopped these chances was the main thing, and that's something which, obviously, as good as Hennessy's been, let's say in the Brighton game, this season he's still been quite inconsistent, and something which we've, you know, blamed Hennessy for is for making, you know, or not making these simple saves, whereas Speroni did do that. But, you know, like I've said already, I've given him a 6 purely because he didn't actually have a lot to do in goal, purely because there was quite little chances for Bournemouth, and obviously he was only called into action a few times. But in terms of the goal, obviously Defoe's first one, you know, you've probably already heard it already in the player or in the match review. But the fact is, you know, the ball came in from the corner. Yes, you may argue it's a really great piece of work, you know, in terms of movement in the box. But the fact that a player was holding Jeffrey Slupp, so Defoe was free in the box, nothing we can do about that. And because, obviously, he's literally right on goal, Speroni can't really do too much about that. So for the first goal, can't really blame him. And then for the second goal, it's an absolutely superb strike from Jermain Defoe, you know, on, I believe it was on his right foot, pinged it over Speroni into the far corner. Absolutely fantastic goal, one of the goals of the season contenders already. And, you know, there's nothing really much you could do about it. You know, some may argue because Hennessy's slightly taller, he probably could have saved it. But still, Jermain Defoe, he's an absolutely fantastic striker, does what he always does, scoring goals. And that was just another classic example. And, you know, I'll talk about Scott Dann later on, but you could argue that actually maybe Scott Dann should have done better by actually blocking Defoe. But like I've said, ball over the top, let it bounce once, and a lovely smart finish over Speroni. But in terms of the game as a whole, you know, just to summarise, I've given him a 6 purely because he didn't actually have that much to do in the game, other than, of course, you know, getting the balls out of his net twice. But overall, I think making them simple saves, you know, one against Defoe, one against Ibe, actually summed up what was quite a good performance from the captain. Now to move on to the right back, Timothy Fosu-Mensah, who I am going to give a 6. Was steady at right back after coming in to replace the injured Joe Ward. So Fosu-Mensah here, I've given him a 6, and much like the performance of Julian Speroni, he didn't actually do a lot in the game, purely because he wasn't either tested defensively or because he didn't actually go forward as much as he would have liked. And And to be honest, the word I use quite a lot for players who have sort of average performances is steady, because he doesn't do anything fantastic, but he's quite an average performance throughout, nothing bad. And actually, when you consider how well Joe Ward has been playing in, the last sort of 3-4 games, it's actually going to be quite hard for Fosu-Mensah, who's obviously been kept out the side. It's going to be pretty hard for him to come back into the side and, play to such a high standard. But I've given him a 6 here purely because actually it was quite a steady performance at right back. Some may argue that he's not actually the best defensively, and we definitely saw that at times in this game with his positioning. But in terms of, going forward, I thought he was great. There was a few times, especially in the first few minutes of the first half, where he was putting lovely through balls to Andros Towns and Wilfried Zaha on the two wings. So not only is he having a steady or an alright performance defensively, he's also showing his attacking attributes. So in terms of putting through them terrific through balls. So that's something that Joe Ward has started to add in his game. Obviously, Roy Hodgson has changed the way Joe Ward plays, so he keeps it simple for him, and he only defends first and he rarely goes forward. But what we started to see from Joe Ward is him going forward, and that's something we saw from Fosu-Mensah in this game. The fact that Fosu-Mensah has actually got a little bit more confidence to go forward, and in this game we actually saw Fosu-Mensah actually drive forward a few times and put in some of them through balls. And there was one in about the 5th minute, picked up the ball, drove forward, won a bit of yardage, and then put the ball through, obviously through to, I believe it's Andros Townsend and Wilfried Zaha. So not only is he having an alright performance defensively, where other than his positioning he done an alright job in terms of keeping Bournemouth at bay, but in terms of going forward he was slightly better at Joe Ward, not because say his crosses were better, but the fact that he was looking more to do crosses than say Joe Ward does. Because something that Joe Ward does is, yes, he can put in a good pass, but he rarely does it because he's obviously been instructed not to go forward, whereas Fosu-Mensah, he goes forward quite a lot more often and actually puts in these deliveries. So rather than just having 1 in 10 deliveries that are good, he would actually put in 10 out of 10 deliveries. Yes, they may not all be good, but at least Fosu-Mensah, unlike Ward, actually puts in the deliveries. But Joe Ward, when he comes back from injury, I think it's quite honestly, because of how well Joe Ward has performed in recent weeks, I think it's only fair that he goes back into the starting 11. But based on this performance here, Fosu-Mensah, although he's been great playing at centre-back for us in recent months, I still think based on defensive performances as a whole and actually keeping the game simple, I think Ward's better. But in terms of offering that sort of attacking outlet, I personally think that Fosu-Mensah's better. So do comment below the video whether you think that Fosu-Mensah's better or whether you think Joe Ward's better, and whether you think or who you think should actually start in the upcoming weeks. But Fosu-Mensah here, I've given him a 6, another steady performance. Now let's move on to the centre-back James Tompkins, who I am going to give a 6. Made a vital tackle to deny Defoe in the first half, was booked for a foul on Josh King in the second. So James Tompkins here, I've given him a 6, and much like what I keep repeating with quite a lot of the players, and I will do later on in the podcast, but quite a lot of the players had quite average performances in the game, and James Tompkins was one of these players who, although he wasn't fantastic in the game, he's still done a job, and that's the reason I've given him a 6, which you could say is an overall average performance. But in terms of what he'd done in the first half, we talked about already in terms of the goal that Defoe scored, where he chipped Speroni. Defoe was obviously Bournemouth's biggest threat throughout the game, and there was one chance where Sakho was down injured, which kept Defoe on side. Defoe was running through on goal, and Tompkins came back, even though he's not the fastest, he sped back and made an absolutely fantastic tackle to obviously stop Defoe. So at that point, I think it was possibly 2-1 to us, or maybe it was 1-1, but wherever the scoreline was, if that goal had gone in, it would have given Bournemouth the advantage. So the fact that James Tompkins, although he isn't quite fast, the fact that he was able to get in behind and actually make that tackle was fantastic as well. Now in the second half, obviously, like I've said already, his performance was quite average, and obviously none more so is obviously the fact that he got booked for a foul on Josh King. I think sometimes you've got to take one for the team, and possibly you could argue that actually on this occasion, Josh King is quite a good attacking outlet for Bournemouth, so actually sometimes by taking a foul on him is obviously stopping him from creating something for Bournemouth. But in terms of his overall performance, I think that it was another solid performance, but it wasn't fantastic. He still done what he had to do defensively, and you can't really put him purely on blame for any of the 2 goals we conceded. So in that respect, I thought he had an alright performance. And when you consider just after Sakho got injured, it looked like that Tompkins had, picked up an injury. He seemed to be limping for quite a lot of the game. But much like what I have to do in rugby when we've played rugby, if you get an injury, you want to try and run it off. And Tompkins, being the rock that he is, he carried on throughout the game. And eventually he shaked it off. And hopefully for the game tomorrow against Watford, hopefully he can shake the injury off and actually play there. Because his presence, or in terms of our defenders, now that I'll talk about Sakho later, but the fact that Sakho is probably going to be out for a few weeks, we're going to need James Tompkins to step up, because we know the quality he's got, but we need him to step up now and be that leader in the team. But in terms of his overall performance, I thought it was good, you know, a solid performance. Made obviously that one goal-saving tackle from Jermain Defoe. So if you had to pick out one pivotal moment in the game from his performance, one thing that stands out, it would be that tackle from Defoe. But in terms of who I think should have been captain, obviously when Mamadou Sakho went off, I personally think we should have given it to James Tompkins. Now, he might not necessarily have a relationship with the club. He's not been one of the longest serving players, so some could argue he doesn't actually deserve to get the captain's armband. But when you consider, obviously he was a leader at West Ham, he's come to Palace, he's been here for 2 seasons now, and when you consider the fact that obviously we know that Scott Dann isn't the best captain, and we know that Julian Speroni is in goal, so you can't really have that captain's impact along the pitch. So you'd expect someone like Tompkins, who I personally think would be a perfect candidate for the leadership. I personally think that he should have taken the captain's armband, because if you see the emotion he showed when Benteke, you know, stepped up to take the penalty, he obviously, if he was the captain, he would have told Benteke straight, get off, that's not your penalty to take, and he would have put things straight. And obviously I'll talk about it later about Benteke and being selfish and the fact that maybe no one could stop him because he was set on that. But surely, I personally think that if Sakho or Tompkins was the captain, based on their reactions and based on how well they are leaders, I think that they would have definitely, you know, gone up there and told Benteke not to take the penalty. But in terms of James Tompkins' performance, like I've said already, made that tackle from Defoe in the first half. Yes, he did get booked and got a yellow in the second half for a foul on Just King, but overall another solid performance, and hopefully in the absence of Mamadou Sakho against Watford, hopefully he will take the captain's armband and lead us to victory. Now to move on to the centre-back and captain Mamadou Sakho, who I am going to give a 5. Had a quiet game before being pulled out with an injury, which he sustained when he tried a back pass and passed the ball back to Speroni. So Mamadou Sakho here, I've given him a 5, and I've already mentioned obviously the fact that he got injured, but in terms of his game overall before he got taken off, I've given him a 5, and that's purely because he had quite a quiet game. So obviously he got the injury and got taken off, but before that, unlike Tompkins, I don't think he had a real influence on the game, whether that be from the captain's point of view or whether that be just in terms of defensive play. I don't think he had any real influence in the game. And you know, I've talked about you can't really blame Speroni for the first goal, you can't really blame Tompkins or Sakho for the first goal, so there's nothing really you can say much about Sakho's performance, purely because he was only on the pitch for about half of the first half. But just to look at his injury, you know, he sustained it when he tried to turn. Obviously he was trying to drive forward, no space, so he turned, tried to pass the ball back to Speroni, but then in doing so it looked like he pulled his calf. So it did look quite serious. It looked like the one against Tottenham last season where he's obviously driven forward and obviously his calf's gone, and we don't know how long it's going to be, but you know, listening to Roy Hodgson's press conference today, it's probably going to look like a few weeks. So maybe it will be 3 games, 3 to 6 games, so maybe 3, 4, maybe even 5 weeks out. But whatever it is, really, yes, we know he tries to be fancy and tries to be good with his footwork, but you can't try and be too fancy and then end up injuring yourself, because if he didn't make that back pass, or if he didn't try to be over dramatic and just passed it back to either Tompkins or to Speroni, he wouldn't have injured himself, because that's the problem. He put himself into trouble because he took too long to obviously on the ball to pass it, and then in doing so he's turned, tried to pass it back to Speroni, and obviously made the injury there. And it does look like, you know, watching the game, looking at the highlights, he's probably going to be out for a few games. So if James Tompkins and Scott Dann can rediscover some of their form from last season, the end of last season, especially the end of last season, then maybe it won't be such a big loss. But in terms of his presence on the field and the fact that he's now the captain, I think that it will be a real miss for the team. But in terms of his performance, had a really quiet game, didn't really have too much to do before the injury, and really, I know he likes to be nice and tidy on his footwork, but on that occasion, rather than just sort of pondering on the ball, let's say, you either pass it or you just simply pass it back. No need to do anything fancy. And unluckily for us and unluckily for him, he's going to be out for a few weeks now purely because of he tried to, you know, over-dramatise, let's say, his back pass. But in terms of his overall performance, I think a 5 is a fair result when you consider he wasn't really on the pitch for long enough to get a higher rating than that. But in terms of his injury, he could be out for a few weeks, and now we've just got to wait for the scan results. But Mamadou Sakho here, a 5 I think is a fair result. Now to move on to the left back, Jeffrey Schlupp, who I am going to give a 5. Went close early on with a shot from outside the box, but was guilty of giving the ball away on a few occasions. Tried to get forward in the second half. So Jeffrey Schlupp here, I've given him a 5, and unlike his performances have been in the last few weeks, this was actually a below par performance from him. And something I did discuss quite a lot last week is the fact that him and James McArthur, they're very similar in the fact that they always put in 6 out of 10 performances. They're always average unless they have a fantastic game. And unlike their performances have been this season, this game was slightly different, a slightly more under par game, and actually he didn't actually do that well in the game, and that's why I've given him a 5. And if you look back at what I've given him this season, I've consistently given him 6s out of 10s purely because of actually he's done alright in that position, you know. Although he hasn't been fantastic, he's had an average performance, done what he had to do defensively, gone forward a few times, and actually didn't make any mistakes or wasn't fantastic. And this game, like I've already mentioned, was completely different. But in terms of the chance he had, you know, quite early on in the first half, the ball came out to him. Obviously, Zaha crossed the ball in. It ricocheted out. Jeffrey Schlupp on the edge of the area had a shot from outside the box and just goes wide. So we haven't really seen him have any goal scoring opportunities since he's joined Palace from Leicester last season. But actually, that was the best chance I've actually seen him take. And actually, it was only a few inches wide from going in. So in terms of that chance, I thought he took that chance really well. And when you consider that shooting and finishing isn't really his forte, I still thought he connected with it quite well and actually got the curl on it, but was unlucky in the fact that he obviously went just wide. But in terms of that, it was great attacking intent from him. The fact that he was able to see the ball coming through on the edge of the area and take the shot first time. But in terms of the bad things, I suppose, about his performance, and the main reason it was a below par performance and a 5 out of 10 is purely because he was probably one of the main players guilty of giving the ball away a few times. So we know that Bournemouth do like to press quite high. They like to put the team under pressure, and certainly they did do that, and they tried to put balls long to Jermain Defoe. So they were putting pressure on us, and Jeffrey Schlupp, although some other time he did alright with the balls and in the fact that keeping Bournemouth out, but quite a lot of the times he was giving balls away, and obviously he had to play catch up in the fact that he has to use his pace to get in behind and make the tackle. And you know, that's great, the fact that he's got his pace to actually get in behind and make the tackle, but if he didn't give the ball away in the first place, then we wouldn't be in that situation where we're under pressure from that chance. So something which he's done in past games, he just obviously had an off game and didn't really do it here. But in terms of his performance, yes, he had that shot, but really he was quite guilty of giving the ball away, and you know, that could have cost us, but unluckily for us it didn't, because other players around him and himself obviously got back to defend that. And then in terms of his second half performance, it was slightly better than the first half. He tried to get forward and try and support the attackers, but that's something that Jeffrey Schlupp, I personally haven't seen enough from him. Yes, Van Aanholt may not be the best defensively, but at least Van Aanholt actually goes forward and tries to be offensive and tries to help the attack, whereas Jeffrey Schlupp, although he's got the pace to go forward, whenever he does go forward, he always seems to pass it sideways or passes it back. So what he needs to try to do is, although he gets forward, he needs to actually try and get forward now and do something with the ball, whether that be a cross into the area, whether that be a pass forward or a long ball forward. He needs to actually try and do something when going forward. And even if he doesn't cross the ball or give it to a teammate, we've seen now that he can actually shoot, and he's not exactly terrible at shooting. Maybe he should at least, like Van Aanholt, actually try and create a few attacking opportunities for himself. But in terms of his performance at left back, you know, I personally think it's going to be pretty hard for Van Aanholt to come back into the side, purely because of how Schlupp's performances have been quite good at left back. So yes, he hasn't been fantastic, but he's been better than what Van Aanholt's been this season. And to be honest, in terms of this performance, you know, people will not really talk too much about his performance because it was under par, but he wasn't really at fault for anything. But in terms of the first goal that Jermain Defoe scored, I've already mentioned it a bit, but obviously the nicely worked corner from Bournemouth, and Jeffrey Schlupp, you know, quite clever vision, the fact that he saw Jermain Defoe's run, he went to run to Defoe, and I believe it was King, maybe, obviously had his arms wrapped around Schlupp, much like a rugby tackle, and stopped Schlupp from actually going forth and obviously blocking Jermain Defoe's shot. So in terms of that first goal, or I believe it's the first, yeah, that first goal shouldn't have stood purely because of that foul in the box, and that should have been a free kick to us. But sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. But when you look at the game, the referee was literally standing right in front of it, so he should have seen that King, or whatever his name was, had his names wrapped around Jeffrey Schlupp and was stopping him from running. And I'm certain that if Schlupp wasn't, being held, he had the vision to see Jermain Defoe's run, and he probably would have at least got there and made Defoe have to take a touch. But great finish from Defoe, the fact that he was able to finish it first time, but really he shouldn't have had that chance purely because of the cheating and the fact that Jeffrey Schlupp got pulled back. But in terms of his performance overall, I've given him a 5. I think that's a fair result. Yes, he did go close with that shot in the first half, but overall his performance wasn't fantastic because of the few times he gave the ball away. But personally, I do think a 5 is a fair result. Now to move on to the midfielder, Luka Milivojevic, who I'm going to give a 7. Was booked for the pulling back of Ryan Fraser in the first half, but was on the spot to powerfully put the penalty past Begovic for the equaliser though. So Luka Milivojevic here, I've given him a 7, and much like his performances have been in recent weeks, it was another solid performance from him. But in terms of his performance overall, yes, he did get booked in the first half for that foul on Ryan Fraser, obviously got the yellow card. But overall, I think his performance in the first half was really good. Defensively, like I discussed last week, he was solid, making tackles, making blocks. And the thing that I saw in this game, which I obviously didn't see in the last few games, is actually he's now starting to show the quality he has on the ball. So not only is he good at protecting the back four and actually winning back possession, he's now actually good at actually putting these long balls forward and putting these long passes forward to start up attacks. And that's something we haven't seen from him. And that's something that when he signed for us, we compared him to Milivojevic and said, actually, he's a pretty similar player in terms of defensive midfield, but he's got a little bit more quality. And now we're starting to see his quality in the fact that he's not only good defensively, but going forward, he was quality as well by putting them balls forward. So in terms of that, he obviously got booked for that foul on Ryan Fraser, but actually that didn't really affect his game. And actually he was quite careful and cautious in the game, the fact that he didn't get a second booking. So he still was really combative in the midfield in terms of, getting the job done defensively, but he still made sure that he didn't do anything stupid and didn't get booked. So overall, a good performance from him. But in terms of the penalty kick, Zaha's obviously ran through in the box, Ake's pulling his shirt, and then Begovic comes off his line and swipes out his legs. So there's no debate whether that's a penalty or not. I don't see why people can say it's a dive when A, you've got someone pulling his shirt, which makes him off balance, and then B, you've got the goalkeeper coming along and slapping his legs, obviously tripping him up. So there's no debate about whether that's a penalty. And then Milivojevic absolutely powerfully puts it in the top corner. Yes, Begovic did go the right way, but because Milivojevic was so precise with his positioning of the ball and his placing, and because of how powerful he put it on there was no way that Begovic was going to take it. And to be honest, I heard them say this on multiple podcasts, Homesdale Radio, FYP, that actually he could be one of the best penalty takers Palace have seen. And certainly, based on the penalties I've seen so far, and the fact that he hasn't missed one yet, and the fact that how good they are, I think we could say he's up there with one of the best penalty takers, purely because of how well he not only places the ball, but the power he gets on the ball as well. So the fact that he not only, yes, Begovic went the right way, but the fact that he was able to put the power and the precision to actually get it in the right area was fantastic as well. So we got Palace level, obviously that brought us back to 1-1, and then soon after we went on to get the second goal. But obviously if it wasn't for Benteke being selfish and egotistical, which is something I'll go on to talk about later, but if it wasn't for Benteke, he probably would have had another goal. Obviously Milivojevic, I think, was going to take the penalty, went to put the ball down, Benteke took it off him, placed it down and took the penalty. Obviously Luka didn't protest too much and let Benteke take it, but he'd be really disappointed with Benteke. And you saw it in the replays, the fact that Milivojevic, yes, he's quite angry that Benteke's taking it off him, but he let him take it and he just stood at the edge of the area with his hands on his hips. And even when the penalty was saved, and even before it was, Milivojevic was just standing there with his hands on his hips, purely showing how all the Palace fans felt that actually we were just so angry at the fact that Benteke took it. Now, I understand why he wanted to take it, in the fact that he wanted to get a goal and the fact that he hasn't scored all season. But in the game where you need to take a penalty and you've missed your last two, and the fact that you've got someone who's scored a fantastic penalty in the first half, surely you let them take it. And you see how angry Milivojevic was, and how, just how, I don't even know how to describe his emotion, but you could see that he was expressionless. He was so angry I suppose you could say expressionless because he didn't do much, but he was literally just standing there on the edge of the area, hands on hips, which shows how disappointed he was, the fact that Benteke missed it. But certainly, there's not a certain chance that if Milivojevic had taken it, we would have scored. But if you look at the stats, it's almost certain that Milivojevic is going to score it, unlike Benteke. So really disappointed the fact that Benteke missed it, but really Milivojevic should have taken it, and some could argue that actually he should have been more firm and actually not let Benteke take it. But if we look back at his reactions, him just standing on the edge of the area, I find it quite funny because he's standing there almost saying, go on then, take it, go on Benteke, you do it, you show us what you're going to do. And then he's almost laughing at him by standing there with no expression, purely to say that actually, you know, you've mucked up our chance. But other than the penalty and obviously the one he didn't get, overall I've given him a 7 purely because I thought that he'd done really well in the midfield. And like I've said already, yes, he's good defensively, but in terms of going forward, I think he's starting to show that quality he's got on the ball. But overall, I've given him a 7. I think that's a fair result. And other than that booking in the first half for pulling back Ryan Fraser, I thought that penalty was fantastic. The way he won that midfield battle was also good. And the fact that he's obviously starting to, you know, get that quality on the ball now is fantastic. But unluckily for us, he didn't take that penalty, because I'm almost certain that if he had taken that penalty and Benteke hadn't have done his stupid run-up, I'm sure that we would have won the game. Now to move on to his midfield partner, Yohan Cabaye, who I am going to give a 7. Back in the side after injury and was heavily involved, and got the assist for Dan's goal. So Yohan Cabaye here, I've given him a 7, and much like what I said in that summary, he's just come back from injury, and actually even though you wouldn't expect him to be 100%, I thought that he was heavily involved in the game. And if you look at the game as a whole, yes, offensively he was getting involved with attacks and was trying to spread the ball out wide. But if you look at the main thing in the goal, he actually got rewarded for how he was involved in the game. And if you look back at Dan's goal, it was actually Cabaye who got the ball from Benteke and put that lovely, you know, cross in for Dan, and obviously he got the assist for that goal. So not only is he putting in good performances now, he's actually finally getting rewarded from them. And we've seen in other games where the ball comes to him and he puts the cross in. This cross was absolutely fantastic. The fact that he was able to time his run perfectly from Benteke, stay onside, and the fact that he put so much power on the ball and curl to actually make sure that he went through to the back post and he went through all of the players that were there, and obviously Dan was able to connect with it. So not only was it great that he actually was able to time his run perfectly to get on the end of it, it was also great the fact that he was able to put the power and the curl, and maybe you could argue the accuracy, to get it to Dan at the far post. But that was absolutely fantastic, and at least now he's getting rewarded for his good offensive performances. But in terms of overall, you know, it was a great performance from him, and that's why I've given him a 7. But obviously he's getting older now, he's obviously not as good as he used to be, so of course he can't last the whole 19 minutes. But if he can put in a performance like this where he gets in the system, when he, you know, helps to attack and helps to help the team offensively, if he can do that in the game, then I don't see any problem with him going off, say, at 70, 75 minutes, purely because, yes, his legs can't do it anymore, but he's still got that quality on and off the ball. And if you had to say or describe how the game went, I suppose you could say just ran himself into the ground once again. So he'd done everything he could for the team, and just made sure, you know, the fact that he was so tired he had to go off just shows how much he gave for the team. Now, one thing I did pick up, obviously I didn't pick up on this until I watched the highlights, and I saw a few people after the game mention this on Twitter, but it was the fact that when obviously Palace scored the goal, he kicked the ball all the way to Speroni, all the way to the other side of the pitch, and that's purely to mock obviously Bournemouth, who were constantly kicking the ball away at set pieces, at free kicks, at throw-ins, purely because obviously it's time wasting, trying to do little skills and little niggly things which obviously time waste and make them a clever side, or a plucky side as people like to call them. But the fact that Cabaye was able to not retaliate as such, but the fact that he was able just to mock them by pumping the ball along to Speroni as well, just shows it's just a bit of fun, just shows that actually he does care, and he's trying to, you know, just mock them for stupid things they do, because there's no need for time wasting in football. Yes, you may say it's clever and it's, you know, it's good, it can help you win games, but really there's no need to do it. And especially in this occasion, it actually came back to fire them purely because they're wasting so much time, and all it does is just limit your chances going forward. But in terms of Yohan Cabaye's performance, a 7 for him. It was great performance when you consider he's just come back from injury, and maybe you could argue not 100%, but in terms of his performance overall, he was heavily involved in the game and obviously got rewarded with that for Dan's goal. But overall, a great performance from him, although he couldn't last the full 90 minutes. And something which I've seen a lot of people say is he ran himself into the ground, and certainly I can't disagree with that. So young goodbye here, I've given him a 7, a great performance from him. Now to move on to Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who I'm going to give a 6. Not his best game for Palace, with very few standout moments. So Ruben Loftus-Cheek here, I've given him a 6, and unlike his performances have been in recent weeks where he's got goals and he's created chances for the team, this was actually quite an under par performance when you consider the high standards that he's set during the season. But in terms of, if you want to summarise his game as a whole, it wasn't his best game for Palace. You know, he didn't do the stuff that he's been doing in past games, and he didn't have the influence on the game as he would have liked. And if you look at the game as a whole, very few standout moments, and unlike in the last few weeks where he's had maybe it's one flick or one turn, there wasn't really much skill or any standout moments, like I've said, in the game which you could really account, and that's why I've given him a 6. And it's not because his performance was less than, say, they've been in recent weeks. It's purely because there weren't very many moments in the game where you thought that was fantastic, or that's going to get us a goal, or that's going to help us set up on an attack. So unlike in past games where we've had these little bits of these little moments where we go and actually see that actually, yeah, he looks quite good. In this game, we didn't actually see any moments of quality. But in terms of his, game as a whole, he was still playing out of position, so you can understand him playing under par. And I still don't understand why Roy Hodgson, with a fully fit squad now, won't play Wilf and Townsend out wide and Benteke up top. Whatever it is, I don't know what it is. Whether he just wants to stick to his 4-4-2, whatever it is, I think that Ruben Loftus-Cheek is struggling out wide, not because he's not got the quality to be out there, purely because he's playing out of position and it's not really fitting him. But you've got to give him credit, and although he didn't have any standout moments in the game, the main reason I've given him a 6 is the fact that he worked hard. So he didn't let the fact that he was playing out of position affect his game, and he still worked hard and tried to actually get stuff for the team. And if you look at one chance in particular, he provided a great driving force in terms of getting the ball forward. So yes, he didn't have any standout moments, and although he did work hard, there was a few moments where actually he was quite a good driving force going forward with them balls he was putting forward, and the fact that he was trying to create for the team. But to be honest, I don't know why Roy Hodgson is playing him out wide when he's fantastic down the middle. And we saw in this game that when he cuts inside, he's great at driving forward. So in the next few games, we actually need to see him playing, down the middle, purely because that's how you utilise his skills. But Ruben Loftus-Cheek here, I've given him a 6. Not his best game for Palace, obviously, because he had very few standout moments. And although he was out of position, he did work hard to try and get stuff for the team. And although he wasn't playing that well, he still provided that sort of driving force in the fact that he was actually trying to get the ball forward. But overall, not the best game from him, but surely there's space to improve. Now to move on to Andros Townsend, who I am going to give a 6. Offered an outlet for Palace down the right and caused a few problems for Charlie Daniels. So Andros Townsend here, I've given him a 6, and much like what was the case with quite a lot of the stuff I've said with Loftus-Cheek, it wasn't actually the best performance from Andros Townsend. And although he did sort of offer us sort of an attacking outlet, let's say, down the right, in the fact that we could get the ball to him, he could run at defenders, most notably Charlie Daniels. Yes, he could do that, but overall he didn't really have that influence going forward. And some I've heard is argue that actually maybe Bakary Sakho should start, because coming off the bench he looks energetic. But really, Andros Townsend, he's got the energy, he's looking lively, he's working hard. It's just a case now of him actually finally getting back into the groove and actually getting his end product back. But in terms of his overall performance, why I've given him a 6, yes, he wasn't fantastic going forward, and unlike in last games, he wasn't really going back and helping defend as much as he has done in past games. I still thought he offered us that sort of attacking threat down the right, and because Zaha was playing quite central, almost in behind Benteke, because of that, Andros Townsend's got to be that main man out wide, and he's still done alright there, and he did cause a few problems for Charlie Daniels, but Charlie Daniels overall, in my opinion, done a pretty good job on him, purely because of Townsend didn't have as much influence as he would have liked in the game. But in terms of his game as a whole, if you want to look at it and look at how he performed, he did work hard in the game, so you can't take that away from him. He still put himself about a bit and looked quite lively throughout, so it wasn't like he was lacking effort. But obviously he was taken off for Bakary Sakho. Some may say harshly when you consider there were other players on the pitch that were not playing well. But overall, I think it was a fair substitution. He wasn't really playing well, and obviously he got taken off for Sakho, and I'll go on to talk about Sakho later. But in terms of Andros Townsend's performance, I think a 6 is a fair result. Obviously, offering us that sort of attacking threat down the right, and although he caused a few problems, didn't really have the best impact on the game. But I think a 6 is a fair result. Now to move on to Wilfried Zaha, who I am going to give an 8. A constant threat for Palace, with his skills and pace causing havoc for the Bournemouth defenders. Won both penalties and came close on a couple of occasions himself, but was booked for an angry reaction to a foul. So Wilfried Zaha here, I've given him an 8, and his performance was a complete opposite to Townsend's in the fact that yes, he put in effort in the game, but at least Zaha actually offered us a constant threat throughout the game, and if you consider that he won both penalties, it's probably proof for how well he attacked throughout the game. But the main reason I've given him an 8 is purely because, like I've mentioned already, the fact that he was a constant threat. So not only was he running down the wings, using his pace to his advantage, and actually when he was playing down the middle, getting in behind, not only was he doing that, but he was also using his skill to get past players and get in behind, which is something we know he's got. We know he's got the skill, but in the last few games, although he's obviously scored a goal and he obviously has had a few chances going forward, he hasn't really played that well. But in this game, he put all the last sort of few games behind him and actually had an alright performance, and that's why I've given him an 8. But in terms of his overall constant threat for Palace, unlike in the last few games, and obviously it was once again it's his skill and pace which is obviously causing problems for the Bournemouth defenders, and most notably Nathan Ake, who actually, yes, he's a great defender, but he did struggle quite a lot to deal with Zaha throughout the game. But in terms of the penalties, I've already mentioned the first one, but Zaha did win both of them, and I've seen people on Twitter saying it's a dive and he should be banned, much like Niasse. But if you look back at them, I don't see how you can both say that they're dives. When you look at the first one, not only is his shirt getting pulled by Ake, which is putting him off balance, you've also got Begovic who's coming off his line and clearing him out. And then the second one, yes, there could be a little bit more debate about this one, the fact that the defender could have got the ball. But if you look back at the replays, he's taken Zaha down, he's cleared both his legs, and yes, he may have got a touch on the ball, but Zaha also got a touch on the ball. So really, in that occasion, they're both penalties. The first one getting cleared out by Begovic, and then the other one, I believe it was Stephen Cook, absolutely clearing him out. And, you know, yes, we missed the penalty, obviously, because Benteke done his stupid run-up and done his stupid penalty technique. But the fact that Zaha won the penalties is alright. And the fact that Eddie Howe came out and called Zaha a cheat for diving, when obviously, like I've explained, he didn't. You know, it's quite ironic when you consider that if he's a cheater, then what does that make your team? The fact that they hold players like they're going to rugby tackle them at corners to stop them running onto a player who's going to score a goal. So before you go and comment about another team cheating, maybe look at your own team and actually see that actually they're quite a dirty team, in the fact that they're not only stopping players and blocking players from going forth and stopping a goal opportunity, but you also got arms around them to stop them going forth to do that. So before Eddie Howe comes and complains about that being a dive, when clearly it wasn't, because there was both occasions he got cleared out, but also you've got to look at it, actually your team cheat just as much. So not only was Zaha a constant threat for them, but because of his pace and skill, yes, it caused problems for the Bournemouth defenders, but it caused good problems for Palace in the fact that his trickery and pace caused the Bournemouth defenders and goalkeeper to make a mistake, which obviously won us the 2 penalties. But do comment below whether you think they were both penalties. But in terms of the second half performance, obviously most of the drama and the 4 goals happened in the first half. In the second half, obviously Zaha, nasty tackle in from behind, and obviously Zaha's got up straight away, really angry, and rightly so, because it was quite a bad tackle from him from behind. Obviously both players got booked, but because Zaha got a bit angry, obviously he got booked, and that's quite understandable. You know, you've got a player making a dirty foul, you're going to get quite angry. But in the last sort of year and a half, we've actually seen him quieten down, not get angry at all these tackles, because he keeps getting tackled and blocked. But in this game, he sort of lost control of his anger. But really, it's not really a big problem, because when you look back at the tackle, it was quite a dirty tackle. So you can understand and have sympathy for him for getting angry on that. But in terms of a way overall to describe his performance, you know, he was an electric performance. The fact that he was running everywhere, you know, running all over the pitch, putting in effort, putting in chances, you know, using his skill and his pace to cause havoc for the Bournemouth defenders. All of that was absolutely fantastic. And when you consider how well he's been playing this season, it was almost like he was too hot to handle for the Bournemouth backline. The fact that he was playing so well, using his pace, running in behind so much, that actually ultimately it was too much for Bournemouth to handle, and obviously they had to try and stop him, and the 2-3 times that they did stop him, on 2 occasions we obviously got the penalty. So not only like I've said already, he's not only using his skill and pace to get in behind and create chances for himself, he's also now using it to actually, cause problems to the backline. And obviously, the fact that he was putting so much pressure on the backline, resulted in 2 penalty awards. But overall, yes, he had a few chances for himself and it was an overall good performance. But I personally think an 8's a fair result when you consider that the fact that he was a constant threat for Palace, using his skill and his pace to his advantage to get in behind. Yes, he won the 2 penalties, and some may argue they weren't penalties, but they, in my opinion, they were 2 well-deserved penalties when you consider the fact that the Bournemouth defenders couldn't cope with his skill and they had to make that foul. So overall, I think an 8 is a fair result. Now to move on to the final player, Christian Benteke, who I am going to give a 4. Had the chance to win it from the penalty spot, but missed after a weak spot kick. Seems to be lacking confidence in front of goal. Needs a goal, as this is now a new record for him, 12 games without one. He was also booked late on. So Christian Benteke here, I've given him a 4, and you've probably already seen this, and you've seen the slight overreaction, in my opinion, on Twitter over his performance. But I've given him a 4 purely because of the fact that he missed a penalty. And before I go on to talk about the penalty, if you look at his performance as a whole and the influence he had on the game, especially in the first half, you could probably argue the fact that he had an influence on both goals. You could actually say that you could probably give him a 5, maybe even maybe 6, maybe even a 7 for his performance. But purely because of the fact that he missed a penalty and because of him being so selfish and putting his ego above the club, the fact that he thought he was going to score it. If you're going to have a penalty in the final minute, absolutely blast it down the middle. Don't be stupid and do your stupid little thing where you try and pass it into the goal. No, if you've taken it off someone who's scored 4 out of 4 penalties, you've got to make sure that that was the right decision to give it to you. But ultimately, he did miss it. But if you look at his performance as a whole, before I go on to talk about the penalty in more detail, if he had put that aside, put the penalty aside, he probably would have got 6, maybe even a 7, overall over the game, because I thought his influence offensively was great throughout the game. And although some may argue it's not his best game, I personally think this season it's probably his best game in terms of influence. And when you consider the 2 goals we did score, so the penalty and the other goal from Scott Dann, he was actually the pre-assister, let's say, because he's the one who passed the ball for Zaha for the penalty. He was the one who passed the ball to Kabay for the cross. So actually he got the pre-assist for them goals. But really, his good performance is ultimately for him, which is quite sad, but although he had a good performance, that's all been overshadowed purely because of how selfish, and the word I like to use is egotistical, the fact that he put his ego and himself above the team. Because surely, if you've got a penalty taker who's not missed a penalty, surely it'd be better for him to take the penalty, purely because it's more likely that he's going to score it, and it doesn't put the team under pressure because someone like you who's lacking confidence does something stupid like that. But just looking back at the thing, yes, Luka has the ball. Luka should no way, even when he puts the ball down, he should not give the ball to Benteke. In my opinion, he should just not necessarily push him away, but say, no, this is my job, I'm the penalty taker, I should take it. And if you look at the reaction from the other teammates, they're all really angry and frustrated at Benteke for missing, purely because Luka was going to take it, Benteke done it, and you see someone like James Tompkins and Wilfried Zaha, as soon as they saw Benteke were on it, they were absolutely mad, running around, waving their hands around, purely because they were so frustrated at the fact that he's taken it, when actually, as a team, and as the management as well, they've given Milivojevic the penalty kick role. That's his job, and Benteke comes in, denies all orders, and just takes control and thinks that he's going to score the goal, his first goal of the season, be the winning goal. It's all going to be great. It's all going to be about him. Where actually he's not. He's got to be less selfish and not think about him. And yes, he's lacking confidence. He hasn't scored in 12 games now. It's 12 games without a goal. But really, if you're that low on confidence, scoring a penalty in the last minute isn't going to do anything to help your nerves. If anything, it's going to put more pressure on you, because that penalty ultimately could have won the game. But instead, he obviously done his stupid little run up where he tries to make the goalkeeper go the wrong way. Admittedly, Begovic made a good save, but that stupid run up and stuff has ultimately cost us the game. And just to top that all off, yes, he had a good first half performance, but another thing just to wipe that all away and just overshadow that is the fact that he got booked late on. So that just summed up what was a horrific performance after all. But to be honest, talk about the positives. I talked about the penalty now, that he's been very selfish and he's put his ego above everyone and he thinks he's better. really, we've appointed a penalty kick taker. The management have done it, the team have done it. It should have been them. And if Luka missed, it would have been a team mistake because they've obviously chosen someone to take it. But because Benteke chose to do it himself, it's not a team problem and it's not a management problem. It's purely on Benteke for being selfish. But to be honest, put the penalty aside, it was probably one of his best games in a Palace shirt. But because of, like I said, it was really spoiled purely because of how his selfish antics, in the fact that instead of, you know, giving a penalty away for someone who's proven at taking penalties, someone who's missed 4 of his penalties for Palace, he decides to go up and take it for himself. But to be honest, if we can all put this aside, if we go on Tuesday night, so tomorrow, and actually win the game, even if we don't win the game, if he scores a goal, that will make amends for it. But to be honest, quite a lot of fans are frustrated, and rightly so, because to be honest, if you've got a penalty in the last minute, you're low on confidence, and you've got someone who's a designated penalty taker, surely they should be the ones to go forth and take the penalty, purely because A, they're the ones who's supposed to do it anyway, and B, he's got a proven record, so why change it anyway? But Christian Benteke here, I'm not really going to talk too much more about him, but I've given him a 4. A really disappointing performance from him. He needs to make sure that he's less selfish in other games. He puts his ego away from the team. He makes sure that he works for the team, and hopefully the fact that he's been made to apologise to all of his teammates and the fact that he got sent home early on Saturday's game, hopefully that will give him an impact and hopefully make sure that in the future he doesn't, you know, he isn't selfish once again. But Christian Benteke here, a disappointing performance from him, which was good in the first half but overshadowed for his penalty miss, but I think a 4 is a fair result. But do comment below, like I've said throughout the podcast, do comment below with your views and especially what you think about Christian Benteke. Do you think we should sell him, which I personally don't think we should, and whether you think he should be dropped for Tuesday's night game. But Christian Benteke, like I've said already, a 4 for him. Now to move on to the subs, Scott Dann, James McArthur and Bakary Sakho. So Scott Dann here, I'm going to give him a 7. He obviously came on for the injured Sakho, and the main reason I've given him a 7 is, once again, he popped up with a goal against Bournemouth, and obviously, like I've said with Yohan Kabai's delivery was absolutely fantastic to the far post, but ultimately, Scott Dann, great positioning to obviously get on the end of that. So he's obviously set a Premier League record for the first defender in Premier League history to score 4 goals against the same opponent in 4 consecutive games. So that just shows that for once Palace are actually breaking the right records and positive records this season. But overall, you know, he came on, obviously scored the goal, which obviously put us 2-1 up, but also I thought we had sort of a solid game in defence as well. So Mamadou Sakho played quite well in recent weeks, and it's quite a big ask to come in and replace him. Scott Dann hasn't played a lot this season, but he's come in and, you know, done a solid job there. But overall, you know, the main reason I've given him a 7 is purely because he popped up with that goal. You know, at that point, went on to, it could have been a winning goal, but ultimately we did concede goals later on. But to be honest, it's great to see him score another goal. He obviously is his first goal of the season, and it's great to see him score and break that record against scoring against the same opposition. Now, in terms of James McArthur, he obviously came on for Kabai, who I already mentioned was quite tired. I'm going to give McArthur a 6 purely because he came on, gave us a bit more fresh legs. He was quite busy, I suppose you could say, in the midfield, obviously coming on for Kabai. So he was running about a bit, trying to put tackles and blocks in everywhere. And although he got booked for a foul on Jordan Ibe, I don't think that took anything away from his substitute appearance. So some could argue maybe if we change the formation up or something like that, McArthur could come back in, because the last sort of recent showings with him starting and coming off the bench, he's been good. But overall, you know, came on the pitch to give us some fresh legs. He done exactly that. But you still could argue he struggled to get into the game. But when you put him on sort of with 20-25 minutes remaining, you can't really expect him to get too much into the game, purely because obviously he's came on, he hasn't played the full game. Then the final substitute was obviously Bakary Sakho. I'm not really going to give him a rating, as he came on for Townsend quite late in the game. But like I've said, he came on quite late, so didn't really have that much influence on the game. And it was quite a short cameo, so you couldn't really expect him to do much in the game. And if, let's say, going back to the penalty again, Bakary Sakho's got a very powerful left foot. Maybe we should have let Sakho took the penalty rather than Benteke. And let's say Milivojevic didn't want to take another penalty because the pressure was too high on him and he didn't want to take another one and possibly miss it. If that was the case and Milivojevic didn't want to take it, which obviously it didn't look like it because Benteke took the ball off of him, but if that was the case, then I don't see why someone like Bakary Sakho couldn't take the penalty, because for Wolves he done quite well. We know he's got a powerful left foot. He undoubtedly would have not have done this stupid run up. He would have put it down the middle or put it up into the top corner and we wouldn't be having this debate. But to be honest, yes, Bukayo Saka, I haven't given him a rating, but obviously that's purely because he didn't actually have that much influence in the game. He wasn't able to, do much in the game and have influence in the game, obviously because it was quite a short time. But to be honest, he had little time to get into the game and had even less time than MacArthur. But unlike MacArthur, he still tried and managed to put in a few decent crosses. But all of the subs here, Scott Dann, MacArthur and Sakho, had little bits of influence in the game. Obviously with Scott Dann, I've given him a 7, obviously with him scoring a goal. MacArthur coming on for fresh legs, I've given him a 6. And obviously Bukayo Saka, no rating for him, purely because he didn't have that much influence in the game. Now, in terms of just a small sort of summary of the game, I suppose the one thing we've got to take from this game is that although it's really disappointing that we've obviously fluffed the chance to score that last minute goal, actually it's another point and it's now moved us to 5 games unbeaten and, not having lost 6 games in the last 7. So that just shows how I wouldn't say turning a corner, but the fact that we're now improving and we're now starting to lose less games and putting in better performances. But to be honest, I've already said this already, but because of the foolish and seemingly selfish decision by Christian Benteke, purely because of that, is made him public enemy number 1 in South London, which really, that win should have been wrapped up, but because of his sort of foolish and selfish decision, obviously that's turned him into public enemy number 1, when in reality, he should have put that penalty away, and ultimately we would have won the game. So really, yes, that's true that it was really selfish of him to take the penalty, but some could also argue that if you look at the game as a whole, the win should have been wrapped up anyway. So we had loads of chances in the second half. The game should have been maybe 3-2 before the penalty anyway, but when we did get the penalty, because of Benteke being selfish and like I've already discussed, he should have really put that away. But to be honest, if you look at the game as a whole and as a team, I thought it was another sort of all-round good performance by Palace. And when you consider it's been one of the worst refereeing performances seen at Selhurst Park this season, you could understand that actually, getting around them referee performances, we still put in quite solid performances. But overall, we've seen bad refereeing decisions in this game. We've seen a good performance. We've seen selfish decisions. We've seen us not take chances. And overall, we've seen another amazing goal at Selhurst. So overall, although we are disappointed about the game, we must value that it's another point on the table and makes us unbeaten in 5. Now for my man of the match award. But before I do that and give you my man of the match, why I thought the biggest influence in the game, I'm now going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. So when you consider in the last sort of 2 games, it was quite a lacklustre performance with both games away from home being 0-0. Coming into this game, we would have probably expected an improvement in the performance when you consider the likes of, Johan Cabaye were coming back into the team. And actually, in this game, it was quite an even affair. And actually, Palace did actually create quite a lot of chances. And even though some may argue it was quite an even affair, we could have won the game in the final minute. And to be honest, even though we missed that penalty, we should have won the game anyway because of the amount of chances that we had in the second half that we should have taken. But when you consider the last few games have been quite dull, quite lacklustre, in this game against Bournemouth the performance improved, and actually there was a few players for me that actually stood out for me in the fact that their performance, they're sort of up their game, let's say. And there were a few players that were not on the shortlist, so say someone like James Tompkins, who I was debating whether to put him in here, but then I had to make a decision, put it down to 4, and Tompkins didn't quite get in purely because I thought that there was another defender who actually had a little bit more influence on the game than say Tompkins had. But the 4 nominations I've put forward for the Man of the Match award are Scott Dann, Johan Cabaye, Luka Milivojevic and Wilfried Zaha. So just to go through why I've put these players on the shortlist and why I personally think that they had the biggest influence on the game, albeit a draw when we should have probably gone on to win the game. But in terms of Scott Dann, obviously he didn't start the game, and rightly so, because the performances of Mamadou Sakho and James Tompkins have been good recently, so there was no reason to start him. But Scott Dann, with the injury to Sakho, came off the bench and he made an impact. Not only did he score that goal, obviously it could have been a winning goal, but it wasn't, but he scored that goal. Great ball in from Cabaye, managed to score that. But also, in terms of defensively, coming in for Sakho, which is quite a big thing to do, I thought he was fairly solid throughout the game. And then in terms of the player who assisted Scott Dann for the goal, Johan Cabaye, I put him on the shortlist because in the game, in terms of his performance and what we missed in the last few games is the fact that he was quite heavily involved. So he wasn't only looking to do his defensive work or just to go forward. He was being involved and making tackles and making passes all over the pitch. And when you consider he got the assist for Dan's goal and he's actually got something to reward him for his performance, that's a great thing. And in terms of just his performance overall, it was another great performance. But the fact that he was heavily involved, passes and tackles are the two main things, and the fact that he also got Dan's assist for his goal is great as well to see. Now Luka Milivojevic, this guy's been absolutely fantastic the last few games, but in this game he scored the penalty, absolutely class penalty into the top corner. I've already discussed it with Benteke, but Benteke shouldn't have took the penalty. You know, Luka should have just put it down and literally stopped Benteke from taking it. But hey ho, you know, we know that Benteke missed it, but Milivojevic scored the first penalty, great penalty, should have taken the other one, which probably undoubtedly would have won us the game. But in terms of his performance, other than getting that match-winning, or could have been potential match-winning goal, is the fact that in terms of the middle, he played quite well throughout in terms of winning that midfield battle. And actually, he's now, in the last few games, he's not only starting to show how good he is defensively, but in terms of going forward, he's showing that he's got the quality on the ball to put in a pass and to put in that penalty. So not only is he doing his defensive job now, which is he's done great in this game, you know, making tackles and making blocks, but he's also now bringing in the quality that he's got on the ball. And then the final player I put on my shortlist was Wilfried Zaha. You know, he was a constant threat for Palace. You know, his pace, his skill was causing lots of problems for the Bournemouth defenders. And when you consider he won both penalties, which in my opinion were both penalties. You know, the first one, Begovic has come out of goal and obviously swiped his legs away, and I believe that the other Bournemouth player was actually pulling his shirt as well. And then the second one, you know, Zaha's got loads of pace, got past a few defenders, ran into the box, and I believe it was Cook made the tackle. You could argue that he got a touch on the ball, Cook, but at the end of the day, he swiped out Zaha, rightly so, got a penalty. So not only was Zaha a constant threat in the game, but also his skill and pace actually caused Bournemouth to make them two tackles, which obviously won us the penalties. And like I've said with Luka probably, not certain, but he probably would have scored the second penalty, so we probably could have won the game, but because of Benteke's selfishness, we obviously didn't go on to win the game. But in terms of these players, you know, I already mentioned that Tompkins missed out, but in terms of these players, I thought they'd done a great job defensively, you know, in terms of Dan's, Kabai's and Milivojevic's performance. And then in terms of going forward, I thought Cabaye was great at getting the assist. Milivojevic was great at actually getting that quality on the ball. And in terms of Zaha's performance, I thought that he was obviously great at using his skill and pace to get in behind and create a few chances. But if I do have to pick one player, although some may argue because he won two penalties and had chances, I should go for Zaha, but I'm actually going to give it to Luka Milivojevic. So congratulations, Luka. You don't get a trophy or certificate, but you do get my sincere congratulations on what was another fantastic, solid performance from you. And the only reason I've given it to him above someone like Zaha is purely because he scored the first penalty. He had calmness when he took the penalty, took it with precision, right into the top corner. No doubt that he was going to miss that one. And then obviously he should have scored the other penalty in the second half, which really annoyed me, the fact that Benteke took it. So not only did he score the first one, he should have taken the second one because he's obviously the penalty taker. But the main thing for me is other than the penalty which could have won us the game and should have won us the game, I still thought that in terms of his midfield battle and then winning that midfield battle with Bournemouth, I thought he won that really well and he'd done really well in the midfield. But also in terms of going forward and actually using this quality on the ball to go forward was fantastic as well. So Luka here, great penalty, should have had another penalty, great on the ball, not only defensively but also going forward and actually showing the quality he's got on the ball. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got an exclusive interview with Roy Hodgson and Scott Dann following the game.
Got to sum up how you're feeling after that finish.
It's hard to put into words really. Obviously the way we played, the amount of chances we created, and obviously the penalty at the end, it makes it that bit more difficult to take. But we had so many chances to put the game out of sight and kill it off, and we couldn't do it. So yeah, we're disappointed. It feels like 2 points lost.
Can you talk me through what happened with that penalty situation right at the end? Because Luka had stuck one away brilliantly earlier on, and then Christian takes this one. What was that all about?
To be honest, I didn't see anything going on at the time. I just thought seeing when Christian was going up to take it. Listen, it takes a lot of courage to go up and take a penalty in the last couple of minutes in the game. Unfortunately for us, he's going to miss that. But we had so many other chances to win this game, and we have to take it as a team, and yeah, we have to move on quickly and forget about that and put in the same type of performance on Tuesday. Hopefully them chances will start turning into goals. Was
there any surprise though at the switch in penalty takers at that stage?
Obviously Luka's our regular penalty taker. He stuck one away. Like I say, I don't really know what went on in that instance, but like I say, we had so many chances to win the game, so the penalty is not the only reason that we've come off with a draw, and we need to move on quickly, like I say, and hopefully we can put it right on Tuesday.
You mentioned all the chances that you had. Is that the one positive you can take out of this, that you could have scored so many more goals?
Yeah, it's also frustration as well. Obviously, to concede, I think the first one wasn't. I think it was a foul on Jeffrey, so it was a bit unfortunate to go a goal down. But we are creating a lot of chances, and we need to turn them chances into goals and into points. We scored 2 today, and we've only come away with a point, so we need to start putting them points on the board with the type of performances we're putting in.
And the performances of Wilfried Zaha are going to be key. He won 2 penalties today. He was a real handful for Bournemouth all afternoon, as the fact that he won 2 spot kicks showed.
Yeah, I mean, you see that week in, week out with Wilfried. He's hard to tie down, as was shown today, and I'm sure he'll keep performing like that in the weeks to come.
And just finally, Jermain Defoe, 2 goals today. One of them was an absolute worldie. I guess there's not much you can do in that kind of situation.
I mean, he's got that type of quality. Most of the players in the league probably wouldn't even take that chance on. Unfortunately for us, he's scored that today, and he's a top quality striker, and hopefully he doesn't score against us again.
Roy, there were so many incidents in that game, but I suppose we better start right at the very end. First of all, can you tell us what happened as you were coming off the pitch? There seemed to be an altercation with a supporter.
No, it wasn't an altercation at all. I was trying to explain to the fellow. He was asking a question. I was trying to answer it, but unfortunately the security guy got involved. But the guy was only asking a question. He asked why Benteke had been told to take the penalty, and I was making it clear to him that Benteke hadn't been told to take the penalty. Benteke just got hold of the ball and decided to take the penalty. So it wasn't an altercation at all.
So why did he take it? It was a unilateral decision by him, with Milivojevic being the penalty taker?
Yeah, exactly. It was a unilateral decision, yeah, and no one on our team was able to wrest the ball from him.
He's a striker who hadn't scored since May, as you'll be well aware. Your thoughts on his decision?
Well, I think it's fairly obvious what my thoughts of the decision are. You know, we the management decide who the penalty takers are, and we don't really expect players during the course of the game to change those decisions. But unfortunately, we're not on the pitch. Had it been a training session, we could have done something about it, but it was a Premier League game, and we're quite a long way from it. And although we tried to shout out our instructions, they obviously didn't get as far as the penalty spot.
Charlie Daniels has told his manager that he got a toe to the ball, that he did win the ball for that incident.
In which case then justice may have been done. But I've got to say, I don't think justice was done over the 93 or 95 minutes, because to create as many chances as we did today, forget the missed penalty, we could really have been very, very clearly in front way before that. And, you know, we're disappointed, of course, with the 2 goals they scored. Albeit that the second one will look like a good goal, we thought it was eminently stoppable. And the penalty, you know, as people will see tonight, if they're going to discuss this game in depth and they're going to analyse every decision as people do, they'll see that Jeffrey Shook was held back and prevented from getting to Jermain Defoe for the ball that was played into him. So, you know, we're a bit disappointed about that. Well, not disappointed, we're furious about that. But I mean, unfortunately, bad decisions are part of a football match. We understand that. But I think if you just take the game as a whole, it was obviously very entertaining, in the sense there were a lot of opportunities, because they created some as well, but they didn't create anywhere near as many as we did.
And your thoughts on the first penalty? Have you seen that again?
No.
Do you know whether that?
No, I haven't seen it. But I think that when you had as many incidents in the penalty area as we had today, and you have players of the quality that we have running at you with the ball, and you're making tackles, I'm afraid penalties are going to occur. But I can't sit here or stand here and say for certain yes it was or no it wasn't. The referee gave them. I'm not surprised he gave them, because on each occasion I thought we had a very clear goal scoring opportunity, and whether a player got a toe or didn't get a toe, I'll leave that to the people who analyse it in slow motion to decide tonight.
You're talking about having a lot of the possession, running at defenders and trying to create chances. Why do you think the goals aren't going in for you at the moment? And certainly no striker has scored for Crystal Palace all season.
Yeah, well, the goals are going in. You know, we've scored quite a few in the last few games. We're averaging more than a goal a game, and that's the third time in a row we've scored 2 goals at home. So it's actually not a relevant comment that we're not scoring goals. We are. If you scored 2 goals at home, that's more than many teams have scored at home today and won games. I've seen at least 2 1-0 victories. So scoring 2 goals at home every game, I don't think is a bad facet.
Yes, I was referring to strikers specifically, that no striker scored for Palace this season. How much of an issue is that, and what can you do about that?
Well, Milivojevic has scored 2 and would have scored 3. On each occasion, Wilf Zaha has been the one who's been fouled. So, in actual fact, it's too simplistic. Like most of the statistics that I see thrust before me, I find them too simplistic. Wilf Zaha, he might not actually have scored today, but he should have scored, if you like, or could have scored 2 had he not been fouled to give us penalties.
And you came into the game hoping to pull out of the bottom 3, and you find yourselves back on the bottom after Swansea's victory today. How much of a psychological blow might that be to the players?
I don't know. It shouldn't be. The fact is, even if we'd have so-called come off the bottom or even come out of the bottom 3, we're still very much anchored near the foot of the table with a lot of other teams, and we've just got to keep working away to make certain that we get the points we can when we can. We missed an opportunity today because there were 3 points on offer for us here today. I personally believe we did enough during the 95 minutes to get those 3 points. If you miss penalties at home, you have only yourself to blame, which would have given us the 3 points. And the last 5 games were unbeaten, which is a clear improvement on the first 7 games where we didn't even get 1 point anywhere. And I think if we keep playing the way we play, we'll get more points. You need a point a game to stay in the league. Unfortunately, we're still trying to play catch up on the 7 games where we didn't get any. But if we keep playing like we've done today, and dominating games in the way we've done today, creating chances like we've done today, we won't have those situations every week where the referee allows them to hold one of our players in the penalty area to go 1-0 up, and then unfortunately a lob beats our goalkeeper for the second one.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson and Scott Dann had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Bournemouth. But make sure to comment next week for my post-match review of the game against Watford. So thanks for listening, and remember to up the Palace.